Well, here we are. You know what to expect every Thursday morning. It is our own AM exclusive. And today we take you into a beautiful space. I'll be telling you more about it. But we're here with the ambassador to Ghana representing Holland. He also represents Liberia and Sierra Leone, or he is ambassador to Liberia and Sierra Leone as well. But he is stationed in Ghana, and it's a pleasure today to host him on AM Exclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jeroen Verhul, His Excellency. He is ambassador of the Netherlands to Ghana. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Benjamin. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
It's good to have you here. So let's start on this note. If you look at the trajectory, the history, the 16th century, that was the first contact with the Dutch to Ghana, hitting the shores of what would then become the Gold Coast in 1598. Since that time, it's been centuries of interactions on and off, and then the recent, bilateral relations that we've had. If I asked you what historically the symbolism is of Dutch-Ghanaian relations, what would you say?
Well, it would be difficult to choose. I think I should choose between Geneva or schnapps or textiles. Both have a very strong historic tradition. So in the trade between Ghana and the Netherlands, both textiles and alcohol, schnapps, have played a very important role. And the reason why I mention them here is because still now they play an important role. So for example, schnapps is something that is used by Ghanaians to celebrate different occasions, whether it is a wedding, a funeral, whether you go to visit a chief and pay respect, you need to bring schnapps. So
a naming ceremony of a child.
Yep. All these traditional events are celebrated with schnapps. So that's an important product. Textiles is another one, which was used to trade, to barter trade in the past. But now still it's being used for fashion, especially ladies like the wax Hollandais, the Dutch wax, for making their dresses. And it's still being produced in Ghana by GTP, and they have different brands, of course Flisco, but also GTP and Woodin. Yeah. So textiles is another element, I would say, in our past trade relations.
And much later we'll talk about cocoa, of course, because that has been another pivotal part of our relations. But beyond these, what do you think Ghanaian-Dutch or Dutch-Ghanaian friendship, relationship over the centuries, what has it been hinged on? Yes, you talk about schnapps, you can talk about the wax prints, you can talk about everything else. But what do you think has maintained that nexus between our two countries?
Well, I think, first of all, the similarities between our countries. We're both coastal nations, so we're used to live with the sea and from the sea and through the sea. And especially for the Netherlands, that is an important element in the context of our country, because we are essentially a trading nation. So we have very few natural resources. So what we need to do in order to build up our economy is to trade, to import, to add value and export again. And that is something we also share with Ghana, because Ghana also in essence is a trading nation. And what we had as our fortune is that we had important industrial nations as our backyard. So for example, Germany was very close to us, and we could use the port of Rotterdam to import goods, to transform them and then export them to Germany. So having that place in a trading system is important for your economic development.
I see. Interesting dynamics in there. But before we even proceed on that front, and I was just sharing with you before we even came on air that I've spent some time in both Amsterdam and Rotterdam, beautiful cities, and how the Dutch have capitalized on, you know, the sea, marine life and everything. Rotterdam, for example, has that beautiful bridge that, you know, can scale off and then be brought back. Interesting technology. But let me just wind back a bit. You've been in town since 2021?
Yeah, 3 years now.
3 years now. What has that experience been like, serving, you know, in Ghana?
Well, it has been a very interesting experience. I've served in a number of African countries. My first posting was also in West Africa, was in Cameroon, so I was posted in Yaoundé. But after that I've been mainly posted in Southern and Eastern Africa, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Ethiopia and Zambia. So I've spent most of my career in Africa, and I really love working in African countries.
You do?
I do, yeah. Yeah,
what
otherwise I wouldn't be here.
The climate, the people, the food, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a number of things. The people, of course, first of all. To work with African people, and it's a generalization, of course, is very rewarding. It's very interesting to see how Africa is developing and to see how you can work together to solve problems. If I look at my own country and we need to solve problems there, yeah, these are very minute, small problems. Here you have really large-scale, life-threatening problems. So it's much more rewarding to work in an environment where you can help to solve these issues than to improve on a marginal thing like we can do in our context. So the people, the challenges, and what I would also say, nature, let's say the bond with nature that Africans have, but also the exposure to nature that you can have in Africa is so different from Europe that it is really exciting to live here.
I see. It reminds me again of something I noticed in the Netherlands. A lot of people riding bicycles, a lot of people swimming, you know, public places and all of that. That makes for interesting dynamics. But you spoke about challenges as well, and they are stark in our part of the world. For you, what are some of the foremost challenges you've noticed? Not necessarily to berate anybody, but challenges that you look at and think, oh wow, we used to be here, or these are challenges that together we can help resolve in Africa, in Ghana, a place like Ghana, or maybe Liberia or Sierra Leone. What are some of the challenges you've noticed?
Well, for example, let's start in the economic domain and talk about trade. And I think one of the things that Africa can learn from Europe is that we developed economically by trading with our neighbors. So, for example, the largest part of our export in the Netherlands goes to Germany, to the UK, to Belgium, to our direct neighbors. And what you see in African countries, African economies, is that a lot of the export goes to either the US, to Canada, to Europe, or to Asia. So why doesn't Africa trade within the continent? And I think that is one of the challenges that needs to be tackled. Because if you look at the development of the European Union, it started with 6 countries, including the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Italy, France and Germany. 6 countries started the European Union, and their objective was to create an internal market, so that what you would produce in the Netherlands could easily be sold in France and Italy and Germany. And it took us decades to get there, because the European Union was created in 1957, but the internal market was not resolved until, I would say, 2000. So it took us decades to get there. But having that objective is extremely important, and if you don't have that, then you will remain in an economic backlog.
I see. Which brings me back to the bit about trade. You mentioned trade. There are some stark trade imbalances, especially where African countries are concerned. Comparing Africa to the West, there's quite a bit of imbalance, and countries in the West have been encouraged to do better for Africa. I mean, if you take a look at even Dutch-Ghanaian trade, you would realize that we exported, even as of 2023, about $510 million worth of goods, largely cocoa products, cocoa butter, paste, and all of that, other residual products, which you're said to be the largest importer of in Europe. But if you look at what you exported to Ghana, it was about 3 times as much, $1.35 billion. Trade imbalances, how can they be dealt with?
Yeah, the biggest or the best solution is, of course, to strengthen your transformation capacity here in Ghana. Because if you look at the composition of trade, what you see is that what we export from the Netherlands mainly to Ghana is petroleum products. But these are petroleum products that have been refined and worked on in the Netherlands or in Europe. Because you extract petroleum or oil from the resources that Ghana has, but you don't transform it. So you need to build up capacity to transform. And cocoa is a good example, because in the past, when we started cocoa trading, Ghana was exporting mainly cocoa beans, and they were processed in the Netherlands or in other European countries. If you look at the cocoa industry now, a large part of the processing, the primary processing, is done in Africa, is done in Ivory Coast, is done in Ghana. So now Ghana is exporting cocoa paste, cocoa butter, and not the cocoa beans. So you already have made that step in adding value. But the bigger step is to make chocolate. And that is going
there
to
are
be...
a few. There are very few doing that here in Ghana, but
do they have
it's
a
a
big
precious
market?
few.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are even exporting. Not too many of them are producing for the local market. A lot of them are export oriented, and which makes cocoa, or should I say chocolate, expensive even in Ghana.
True.
Makes no sense.
No, true. And if you look at chocolate, what sells in chocolate is a brand. It's Mars, or it's Nestle, or it's what is it?
Cadbury.
Yeah, Calgary. Those are the brands that sell the chocolate. And with a brand, you can add a margin. And if you don't have a brand, name me one Ghanaian chocolate brand that is known in the West and that sells in the West.
Well, I think there's, is it Fair Afrique? There's something like that. There's Niche. I could mention a few that some are making some inroads.
Yeah, no, that's true.
In the West and other parts of the world. But there are few, and that's the problem.
Yeah. And they have to compete with large multinationals who have already a big stake in the market, and indeed already economies of scale. They have marketing, they are established brands, so it's difficult to compete. But yeah, if you want to compete, you need to carve out a niche, and niche is perhaps an interesting connotation with the company here, but you have to carve out a niche. And niche is an interesting example because what they are trying to do is not only to invest in Ghana, but they also invest in the US and in Europe. Because they know that chocolate needs to be produced close to the consumers. So they're not only investing in Ghana to build up capacity here, but to strengthen the forward and backward linkages with markets. And that is where Africa needs to invest in.
And throughout all of what you said, what was ringing in my head, even before you mentioned it, add value, add value. But we've discussed adding value for decades. It doesn't appear we've made that many inroads. If you, let me just switch it up. If you were in leadership in Ghana, let's pretend you're Ghanaian, and you were in charge of, let's say Cocoa Board or the Ghanaian cocoa bracket. What would you do now, especially as cocoa production is plummeting? What would you have done now?
Well, what I would have done is to review this practice of the syndicated loan, because that perpetuates a system where Ghana sells its cocoa on the future market and uses it as a collateral to get a loan. So that establishes already the price that you're going to pay to the farmer based on the current price, not on the spot market price. And I think that that is a system that needs to be reviewed, because what you see is that because of this collateralization, the contracts, the future contracts, are delivered. That means that a lot of the cocoa is exported, but exported as raw beans. And it's interesting to note, if you look at the capacity, the processing capacity in Ghana, there is about 500,000 tons processing capacity in Ghana for cocoa. But it's not being used.
True.
And it's not being used now because there is a shortage of supply of beans, but there's also this system which promotes exporting raw beans instead of processing them here. So it's just an example. But there are some traditional mechanisms, some traditions that are used and are important for the economy of Ghana, but which you need to review if you want to really add value and promote adding value in Ghana itself.
I see. Would you like to touch on them, or shall we just proceed from there?
We'll proceed from there, yeah.
All right. Let's talk now about the Dutch combination approach, and what is it in the first place, and how can Ghana and the Netherlands tap into it for a mutually beneficial system?
Yeah, mutual beneficial is the key word here. So the combination approach that the Netherlands is promoting aims at combining development instruments and trade instruments. So that is the combination that we put in place. And the idea is that especially economies that are developing, you cannot use your trade instruments to push relations with that economy. So you need a combination of development, some concessional products that you have, some concessional financial products that you have, in order to promote trade. So that is the basic idea that we are doing here. And it ties in very well with what Ghana is trying to achieve with the Ghana Beyond Aid program. So Ghana wants to wean off development assistance and to move towards investment and trade. So we're very much into synchronization with the Ghanaian agenda here.
This synchronization, of course, like you said, it's mutually beneficial, it ought to be symbiotic. What has it yielded so far?
Well, it has yielded so far that we are in horticulture, for example. And horticulture is a sector in agriculture which is very strong in the Dutch agricultural system. It's very strong in the Dutch export. What the symbiotic effect can be is that we are producing a lot of horticultural products in the Netherlands in glass greenhouses. And that means that we need to use energy to heat these greenhouses so that we can produce horticultural products, which is not very sustainable for the environment. Ghana has a lot of natural warmth and a lot of land. Ghana has much more land than the Netherlands has. So what we are looking at in this symbiotic relationship is the comparative advantages of the two countries. So what we are promoting here is very simple technology that we can use here in Ghana to improve production. So for example, what we have set up here in La Denta, maybe it's interesting for you to go and visit that site. It's in the Fra High School in La Denta. We've set up a demonstration garden where we are showing with what simple technology that we can offer. It's very simple irrigation technology, it is very simple farming practices, good agricultural practices. It is also very simple seeds and planting materials that can be used in order to get better yields. So with this combination of inputs, you can get yields that can be marketed, and then you can get a decent income. Because what we want to achieve with the combination approach is that we show that farming can be a very good business model. You don't need to hand out inputs, you don't need to hand out free seeds, you don't need to hand out loans or subsidies in order to promote farming. You can do farming as a business. And only then we believe farming will be done sustainably in a private sector way.
Now, you look at cocoa production, and we're focusing a lot on that because you are one of our biggest partners when it comes to cocoa exporting from Ghana and everything in between. And you are one of the largest consumers of chocolate as well, not just in Europe. Like I said earlier, our production has dropped. There was a time when we hit 800,000 plus million, and now it is about less than half of that. But there are different factors. I would say foremost among them, illegal mining, galamsey. Of course, there are the issues to do with pests and other related matters, but especially when it comes to galamsey. You were with us recently in the studio with Richard Razali, the EU ambassador to Ghana, and you spoke forcefully about this. What is your reading of illegal mining? And from where you sit, you've been here for 3 years, has Ghana made any inroads at all in the fight against galamsey?
Well, I would be lying if I would say that there were many inroads in the fight against illegal mining. And I deliberately don't use the word galamsey because I think that gives it a sort of an exotic air, an exotic image, as if something cultural, something African, whereas we should name a spade a spade. And what is happening is that this is small-scale illegal mining. And what you see is that the production of gold in Ghana has increased substantially, not in the formal sector, but mainly in the informal sector. So I would say that if you look at those factors, there is not a lot of success in combating illegal mining. And if I speak to organizations that are forcefully opposing illegal mining, they tell me that it is very, very difficult to get enforcement on, for example, areas where illegal mining is taking place. And even so, that if the police acts and they arrest somebody, that person is often out of prison very soon afterwards.
Let off the hook.
Yeah.
By the powers that be.
That's very interesting. So why is that? Why is Ghana not able to tackle illegal mining?
Do you think it's a matter of commitment? Do you think the commitment, that will to get it done is not there?
Well, I think it depends indeed on capacity. Is there the capacity to do it? Is there also the endurance to, after you've arrested somebody, to prosecute somebody and then put them in prison? I don't see it happening, and I wonder why.
Why do you think so? We're in Ghana, we're Ghanaians, we see, we know, we criticize. I'm a media person, you've probably heard me ranting on some of these, but from where you sit as, and I use this respectfully, an outsider, but an insider in the trading business, why do you think?
Well, probably there are parties that are interested in maintaining the situation as it is. And I don't have the knowledge and the expertise to indicate who those parties might be, but if there was a genuine political will and if there was an enforcement capacity, then Ghana would be able to solve this issue, but it's not happening.
And what is interesting is that in recent times we have also had in our law books laws that allow people even to perform certain mining activities in forest reserves. And some forest lands have been sold out, so to speak, captured by politically aligned people or politically exposed people. One infamous one was the Forestry Commission's former boss, who passed, and in his will, some parcels of land in the Achimota forest had been willed out. That raised it. It stoked the anger of many people, and in recent times we've seen same come to the fore. It just tells you that some things are simply not working. But moving on from there, as an embassy, as an ambassador, what other initiatives are you embarking on? Yes, you've told me about the model facility in Adenta, that school in Fafraha. What else are you doing to contribute to supporting Ghana's cocoa sector in a mutually beneficial way?
Yeah, the focus is on horticulture and on cocoa. And yeah, there are various levels and types of interventions. Of course, we work closely with government. So between our Ministry of Agriculture in the Netherlands and the Ministry of Agriculture here, we have recently formed an agricultural working group in which we agree on the agenda of collaboration. And for example, in a few weeks' time we'll have the first meeting of this agricultural working group, and we're going to establish a working program to see where we can expand collaboration. On cocoa, for example, one of the big problems in the cocoa sector is the swollen shoot disease, which is a virus. And what we are going to discuss is to see if we can find Dutch research institutions, Dutch expertise, Dutch knowledge that can help combat the viral disease of the swollen shoot. So these are some examples of collaboration that we can do through government-to-government collaboration. That's mainly on research and on the policy environment. In terms of practical support, I've mentioned the community garden, which is a demonstration project. So what we there do is to show how you can make money by using certain techniques. What we also work on is what we call the Orange Corner Acceleration Program. And with that, since 2019, we are supporting young entrepreneurs in Ghana to accelerate their business. So we have supported about 300 entrepreneurs so far. And we've just launched the 9th cohort starting this month. And what we try to do is to help them expand their business. So by training them, by showing them how they can formalize their business, how they can export, how they can market, how they can better organize their company, how they can better organize their books, etc. So that's a simple business training, but which enables them to expand their business. So that's the Orange Corners program. And for example, we're also working on the seed sector, because if you want to have good agriculture, you need proper seeds, and the Netherlands is one of the leaders in seed development. So what we're doing right now is working with the Ministry of Agriculture on a study on how we can help develop further the seed sector. But we already have a number of businesses from the Netherlands that are active in Ghana. And there's, for example, a company called East-West Seeds. They are based in the Netherlands, but they work in Asia and in Africa. And what they do is they work with extension workers and with demonstration farms to show farmers how they can use improved seed varieties to improve their production. Yeah, these are just a few examples of the different ways we are trying to improve collaboration both in the cocoa and in the horticultural sector.
Right, and I'm happy you kept mentioning seeds and other things, but you've also kept mentioning government and all of that. I'd like to find out one core institution here that helps agricultural extension officers, among others, is the CSIR. Have you had any collaborations with the CSIR?
I don't
the
think
Center
so.
for Scientific and Industrial Research.
No,
they have
I don't think so.
arms that I don't know whether in your collaborations with government you have also roped in the CSIR.
I don't think so, but I can check with my colleagues because I know about, let's say, the main lines of collaboration, but I haven't come across the CSIR yet.
Let's also look at the partnership from the standpoint of trade and how it yields foreign exchange. Like I said, I think for a number of years now, the increments in Ghana's trade to the Netherlands has gone up by 8+%. The Netherlands to Ghana has gone up by 9+ percentage points. So fair game, more or less. But there are challenges, not just from here, sometimes investments coming in. There are challenges. What are some of the bottlenecks that you see so far? And how can we address them from our end?
Yeah, I think the main issue for investment, if we talk about investment, is that there has to be a very stable and predictable environment. And that is both in terms of economic environment and in terms of, let's say, the investment climate, in the sense that if you have land or if you have a building, that you know that land and your building is secure. And yeah, I think that both in terms of land security and in terms of economic stability, there are issues that Ghana can improve on. If you look at the exchange rate, for example, it has been unstable for quite some time, and it has steadily deteriorated. So if you're a company that imports and has to pay in foreign exchange and you have to sell it on the local market, then you have to steadily increase your prices, which in an environment where people's incomes is not increasing makes it difficult to keep your market share. So those companies that have invested here are struggling at the moment to continue.
And we know some have left. Some have left the country, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which would mean a reduction in jobs, which would also impact the multidimensional poverty and everything in between. But
fortunately, I know of no Dutch companies that have left so far. But what I know of is companies that have delayed their decision to invest in Ghana. And that is partly related to the economic situation, but also related to the elections that are forthcoming in December, that some companies want to wait to see what is happening with the elections, to see what government comes into power, what policy that government is going to pronounce. Because there is this tradition in Ghana that every 8 years there's a change in government, and with that change in government there's also a change in policy environment. And these 8 years have now lapsed, so companies looking at the past, it's no guarantee for the future, but they look at the past, say, well, let's wait and see what is happening in these elections before we make a decision to invest millions of euros in an African country.
Indeed, and of course they have to safeguard their interest, and you also want those businesses, while you want them to come in and invest, you don't want them to incur losses, because then it impacts your economy. Fair game. But how else are you encouraging Dutch businesses to come and invest in Ghana?
Well, if you encourage a company to come here and the company fails, then you have an ambassador who will campaign against investing in Ghana. So we only have benefit if we get companies here that succeed, because then you have ambassadors for investing in Ghana. And that is what we want to achieve, is that we have private sector entrepreneurs coming to Ghana that succeed and can act as ambassadors for others to come and invest as well. Then you have a self-strengthening process, a self-strengthening mechanism that will help Ghana and the Netherlands, because again, it's about mutual benefit.
Let's look now at good governance and security and how they impact everything else, because if there's no security, you can't do business. There will be no trade. When you look at Ghana's governance barometer, there have been quite a number of challenges. But I would leave you to talk about what you see. You look at the latest Afrobarometer survey, for example, and it made for stark reading for me. Pretty interestingly, it was showing that countries that had gone the way of what no one wants, military rule, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, seemed to be faring well in some categories. Now, even more shocking, the level of tolerance of military rule in these countries had shot up. I believe it is, I don't know whether it is Burkina Faso, Guinea or Mali, but the level of acceptance had risen by about 40 percentage points. In other words, the level of rejection had moved from 58% to 18%, which sends a very wrong signal. But why is that happening? Some would say democracy, the impact of democracy has plummeted per the survey. When you look at Ghana's picture in terms of governance, what do you see?
Well, I was at the launch of the Afrobarometer report, and it was indeed a very interesting presentation that was held. But you have to look very carefully at the questions that were asked to the public. So about military rule, for example, the question was, would you accept military rule if democratic leaders are not performing? So there is a sort of conditioning for the acceptance of military rule. And indeed, also in Ghana, you saw an increase in the people saying yes to that question. So that is worrying, I agree with you. But what also came out of the Afrobarometer is that overall in Africa and also in Ghana, people saw democracy still as the best model to pursue their interests, as the best model for being governed. So democracy is still very much favored, I would say, by Africans. But democracy is not a model that you can just rest assured that it will prevail. It is something you need to continuously uphold, you need to strengthen it, you need to work on it, you need to maintain it. Not only in Africa, also in Europe and also in the United States. Democracy is a mechanism that needs support, that needs to be maintained, that needs to be nurtured. Otherwise, you can easily fall prey to all kind of authoritarian tendencies. And it's not a unique trait in Africa. And there's a strong link between economic performance and preference for democratic systems or not. And that's also part of the Afrobarometer report that I gathered from that presentation, is that if economic performance goes down, then there's more criticism of the democratic process. So it's a very complicated system of interlinkages, but what we should gather from it is that democracy is still the favored option, and that we should work together in order to maintain and strengthen democracy as the best way to govern a country.
You can look at things like food security, and of course that also devolves into national security, and it is clear that food sufficiency is not the same as food security. There are different dynamics. In Ghana, for example, between the farm and the market, there are lots of gluts, farmers lose out and all of that. If you were to look at governance generally and security, I don't know whether you would give us on a scale of 1 to 10, but how do you feel during your period of being in Ghana, Ghana has fared on these dynamics, governance and security?
Well, security has been quite stable, and yeah, of course there are security threats, and so far Ghana has managed those security threats quite well. If you compare to Ghana's neighbors specifically, then Ghana has fared very well. But that is not to say that in the future Ghana will also maintain the same record. If people are unhappy about their economic prospects, then insecurity can certainly loom. Look at what's happening in Kenya, where young people are protesting against lack of economic opportunities, against what they perceive as a government that is not performing. And yeah, that creates a lot of insecurity. What risk does Ghana run to go in that same direction? If economic opportunities are not coming, with a youth bulge that Ghana is facing, with an increasingly educated youth, because you have free secondary high school education, you have more and more tertiary education, so the young people are getting more and more educated, whereas the number of jobs that they can get is not keeping pace with the number of people that is on the market. So that increasing gap will create tension. And I'm not saying that that will result into violence or insecurity, but it is certainly a risk.
I have seen some reports, indices measuring happiness across the world, and the levels of happiness in Ghana keep reducing. I mean, you look at it economically, even if you don't want to look at other bits. Salaries are not increasing. Inflation, food inflation, non-food inflation, skyrocketing, still in the 20s, dropping from about 54%. The exchange rate is maddening in this Fourth Republic. I've never seen the pound cross 20 cedis. It has now, at least not since 2000. And all the other factors in between. When you go out, you interact with ordinary Ghanaians, you go for programs like at the Afrobarometer, do you sense that level of unhappiness from the ordinary people you interact with?
It's funny that you talk about happiness, because if I compare the average Ghanaian with the average Dutchman, I would say that the Ghanaian is happier than the Dutch person. So happiness and economic welfare do correspond in a certain way, but not one-to-one. I think that the way of life, for example, family life, that Ghanaians entertain, the way that the community bonds together, is much stronger than we have, for example, in the Netherlands. And, for example, loneliness is a factor impacting on happiness. And that is a factor we are struggling with in Europe and the Netherlands.
That is a general problem.
Yep.
It's a general malaise across Europe. Loneliness. I mean, even if you look at some parts of Asia now, you know, in Japan and others, inquiries are being made into why young people are not marrying. People are going solo more. Yep. Here, we've not completely lost that. But in terms of economic happiness.
True. Yeah, there you have a fair point. And that's what when I go out and I speak to people, that's what I hear people complaining about, that they are not able to buy their next meal, for example. And that salaries are not keeping up with prices. And that worries people, absolutely. And that is something that also worries me.
The Netherlands is a development partner for Ghana. We're at a crossroads. We're at the very doorstep of our 9th consecutive democratic election. I know you are concerned. You want to know how things will turn out. Dutch businesses are concerned. But how invested are you in free, fair, transparent elections come December the 7th?
Very much so. And I think that Ghana also is very much invested in that. We've been engaging with the Electoral Commission, we've been engaging with political parties. Today even we were engaging with the Manifesto Committee of the NPP. Last week we were engaging with the Manifesto Committee of the NDC. And that shows that the democratic process is very much alive in Ghana. parties are working to develop their manifestos. The government, the Electoral Commission, is working to set the stage for the elections, and the flag bearers are out campaigning to campaign for support for their candidacy. So that democratic process is very strong and will yield results in December.
In terms of the chaos that we've seen in other parts of Africa, we must, Ghana has been touted as a beacon of democracy, a beacon of peace. From where you sit, you are certain that some of the despicable things we saw in the last election, 8 people died and all of that, will not be seen in 2024, right? How are you going to contribute to that?
By mainly strengthening Ghanaian institutions to deal with these issues. So, for example, we're working with the National Peace Council, we're working with civil society organizations to strengthen the mechanisms to resolve those conflicts in a peaceful manner. Because we don't want to see people die in this violence, this election-related violence. And one thing that needs to be ensured is that accountability takes place. And unfortunately, the incidents that you mentioned from the last election, so far, as I understand it, there's no accountability for those events. And I think that democracy could be strengthened by providing accountability for these events. And that would also help preventing them from occurring again.
You mentioned that you had engaged the manifesto committees of both the MPP and the NDC. What did you tell them?
Well, we didn't tell them anything. It's not our place to tell political parties.
Or what did you share with
Exactly.
them? What did they tell you?
So what we shared were some of the concerns we have with regard to focal sectors where we as an embassy are working in. So that is cocoa and horticulture. And what we did was to engage a consultant to talk to stakeholders in the sector and to find out what the concerns are of stakeholders, whether these are farmers or processors or traders or financing institutions or development partners, civil society. All those stakeholders were interviewed. What are your concerns? And we've synthesized these concerns and shared them with both manifesto committees, so that they, from their ideological and party political views, can come up with an answer, a response to those concerns. So that was basically what we did. We facilitate the identification of issues that should be resolved, and what we will be looking forward to is to see how the parties are going to answer to those issues in their manifestos.
All right. As I take your final words, I want to sneak in one last bit as well. There have been calls for a debate. We've seen that in the US. Now Joe Biden has stepped aside for Kamala Harris. I've engaged some...
You're already sure that Kamala Harris will make it?
I do not know, but I'll leave that to the Americans.
Yeah, exactly.
Some have said that it is the ruling party in Ghana that needs a debate the most because they are hemorrhaging in terms of the economy and other things. But from where you sit, what would be the relevance of a debate ahead of, and I mean a presidential debate, ahead of the 2024 elections? Then you can give me your final thoughts.
Okay. Well, in the past we have been working closely with IEA. So there is a Dutch organization called the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, and they worked closely together with IEA to promote political party organization in Ghana. So they worked with NDC, MPP, but also with other parties. And one of the things that they have been working on with IEA was organizing these presidential debates. And it's not because of that history that I would promote a presidential debate. It's more for the electorate in Ghana to make an informed choice, that they have the opportunity to hear both candidates for the presidency and ideally also their candidates for their constituency seat, that they can hear what the different candidates have to bring to bear to solve the issues that the electorate is struggling with, and then make a choice. You can go to campaign meetings, you can read the manifesto, but in a debate you often get a clearer understanding of where people stand and what choices they make. And the choices they make in the debate will also be the choices that they make as president or member of parliament. So for the electorate it's very important to know that, so that they can make an informed choice.
Well, in 2016, 2020, there were no such debates. In recent times, the IEA, which you mentioned, proposed that this happened, but unfortunately, it didn't appear they had informed the political parties. And so the NDC came out, for example, and said, well, we won't be participating in this because we are not even in the know. So I guess maybe some more work ought to be done on that front. Any final words?
Well, just to thank you for joining us at the Netherlands Embassy, because we're recording this interview at the Netherlands Embassy. We're very privileged to have this embassy here in Accra. It's a beautiful location in a beautiful city.
I agree.
And we're very privileged to be here. And I very much enjoy my time here in Ghana. I have been staying here for 3 years. Normally, an ambassador would stay for 4 years, but I've applied for an extension.
You have?
And it has been granted, so I'll be staying for another 2 years in Ghana.
Wow.
And I very much look forward to working with whichever party is going to be in power after the elections in December.
I have to sneak in this. My producer is not going to be happy. What's your favorite Ghanaian food?
That is kelewele.
Kelewele?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I pronounce it wrong?
Kelewele.
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 Kelewele. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my favorite, the fried plantains.
So next time I need a favor from the Dutch ambassador to Ghana, guess what I'm going to be? I'm going to come bearing gifts of kelewele. Well seasoned. Do you like it well seasoned?
Well seasoned, absolutely. Yeah, nice and spicy.
Okay. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you so
Benjamin.
much
Yeah.
having us here. And like he's mentioned, we've been here at the Dutch Embassy, and I've been engaging His Excellency, the Dutch Ambassador to not just Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone as well. And Jeroen Verhoel is his name, and he joined us for a conversation. I hope I got that right.
Absolutely, Benjamin.
All right. This has been another installment of AM Exclusive with me, Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.